introduce my friend and colleague, Juan de Dios Pineda Gadarama, from Puebla and from Albuquerque. Juan?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Juan Pineda. I am from Mexico City, and I am working at the University of Puebla. I am visiting professor in the Institute of Government, and also I have some kind of activities in the University of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I would like to express first my gratitude for my dear friend Donald Klinger, who has done a lot with Mexican universities and also with Latin American universities. Donald is a very great scholar, good researcher, and very good friend. Thank you, Donald, for inviting me to be attending this important symposium. Also, I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Terry Schwartz for organizing and chairing this symposium. Thank you, Dr. Schwartz. The panel that we are going to open is named, is the second panel actually, and is named Mexico and the USA Share Issues in Human Security. We have, common interest and agenda for future collaboration between Mexico and USA. I have the pleasure to introduce three people that are very good scholars and they have a lot of experience in this matter. I would like to introduce first to Miss Sandy. In a second, please. Miss Sandy Moy-Lenin, who is director of the Governor's International Trade Office. She oversees the state's international business development activities, helps Colorado companies sell internationally through sports markets, Colorado business environment, and to international companies looking to locate in the USA. Dr. Sandy, you have the word. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I feel very honored to be just upgraded to a doctor. I really am not. I am actually a graduate of the CU Business School, not a doctor. But again, I want to thank Don Klinger here for inviting the governor's office to be part of this conversation. It's really important and really timely too with what's going to be happening in October this year in Colorado Springs, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But again, I thought I would kind of taking Greg, the last panelist, had kind of talked about, the federal issues at the top, bilateral federal issues that are being worked on. But he also mentioned kind of how it's important to be really looking at the community and looking locally at issues and common interests locally that can help identify and help also, I guess, influence policy at the federal level. And I'll kind of frame my talks really about what's going on between Colorado and Mexico economically, and really what those relationships are and how those relationships are strengthening and what that means then for economic security and really just in human security as well. So as you've heard before, Consul General Bayo had mentioned that Mexico and Colorado have a pretty strong friendship, mutual beneficial economic relationship. We've formed not only economic ties, but we have that social tie as well. I think the consulate does mention that we have about 1 million Mexican nationals living in Colorado. That's about 20% of our state population is of Mexican descent, or parents have been born in Mexico, or have some relationship to Mexico. That's 20% of our population, so a pretty strong cultural and social relationship that's already here between Colorado and Mexico. We have a number of tourism relationships, we have a number of educational exchanges between most of our universities here, and we also have a pretty strong trade and investment relationship. And that's really what I'm going to focus on. And this relationship has been really working for the past several decades and growing stronger really because of NAFTA. And it's really benefiting not only Colorado, but also Mexico. It's a very mutual beneficial relationship. Really the economic transformation that is going on in Mexico, really because of the Peña Nieto economic reforms, really in energy and telecommunications, just to name a few. I think there's 14 different economic reforms that I think my friend Ellie is going to speak about a little bit later. But those two industries are really strong in Colorado, and Colorado companies will benefit from these reforms, as will the Mexican economy benefit from some of the technology that will be coming out of the US to come in and help strengthen the Mexican economy. So trade between Mexico and Colorado is robust. It's actually growing as well. Last year, 2014, hit a record year between imports and exports between Colorado and Mexico. It's roughly $2.3 billion worth of goods and commodities that are exchanged between our borders, and another estimated $3 billion worth of services that are going back and forth between our borders. So pretty significant. In Colorado, it's estimated about 700,000 people work in an area that depends on trade, two-way trade between all the countries. But Mexico itself, I think, is responsible for about 110,000 jobs in Colorado. That means that if you are working for a company and you are exporting to Mexico, that's a job that's created or counted. Or if you're importing and sourcing from Mexico, again, it has been mentioned that Mexico really is becoming that industrial zone in North America. So a lot of our companies are succeeding because they're importing goods from Mexico, sourcing goods from Mexico, maybe tweaking them a little bit here in the US and then selling them throughout the globe. So again, a lot of number of jobs that are in Colorado that are because of trade with Mexico. And I think that's an important, when we've got jobs that are benefiting our people because of a large market like Mexico, I think that's, it's in all of our interests to keep the security issues between our two countries strong. Really because of NAFTA, trade between the US and Mexico has grown, but really it's benefited Colorado. Mexico used to be our 7th largest trading partner, even though we share a border with Mexico, but now it's our 2nd largest trading partner for Colorado. I think the US is its 3rd largest, but in Colorado we have more of a dependency on trade with Mexico. And a lot of that is because of our shared cultural relationship and our shared industry relationships as well. So really prior to NAFTA, we didn't sell, I think it was about half a billion dollars that we sold. So now we're up over almost $2 billion to Mexico in trade. So again, pretty significant. And again, we credit trade really with our NAFTA partners, which makes up about 40% of all trade coming out of Colorado, coming in and out of Colorado, is to our NAFTA partners. So again, this North American relationship is really important. And again, trade is not just our high-tech goods, it's also pretty traditional industries that are doing business with Mexico. So we ship about 27% of all ag products go into Mexico every year out of Colorado. And ag products, that's beef, that's beans, we actually ship beans to Mexico, barley, wheat, things like that. So 27% of all of our ag exports are going to Mexico. Very important market. We have a very invested interest in keeping those security relationships open because, again, 27%, and that's affecting pretty much every community in Colorado. When we are selling and growing things in Colorado and selling them in international markets, that really changes what's going on locally. We are employing people because we're able to sell things into Mexico. Also, new economic sectors are benefiting from what is going on in Mexico. We have a number of different companies that are doing quite well in Mexico, including companies in the environmental services. So we've got a great Colorado company, Silver Bullet, that does water treatment, not only for human consumption, so they have a lot of water treatment facilities in the hospitality industry, really, through all the resorts and hotels. They treat water, but they're also treating water for animal consumption in Mexico. So they're allowing the Mexican community or agricultural community to, I guess, let their cows drink good water so that they're more productive. So very, very beneficial. In energy, again, some of the reforms that are going on in Mexico, a lot of our Colorado-based companies are going in and performing all sorts of environmental testing services with Pemex. We have a number of our companies that are already selling to Pemex. So that's an incredible economic driver for our economy, but it's also very beneficial to what's going on in Mexico. In aerospace, Mexico just bought a Colorado-made satellite from Lockheed Martin up in Denver for telecommunications purposes. So it's the government of Mexico bought a Colorado satellite. So lots of opportunity in aerospace. And really, it's beyond goods and services, like I said. It's also an opportunity, these trade relationships that we've built, to really exchange ideas and really build additional networks. And that's really what our governor has been doing with, he's made a couple trips into Mexico, two times since he's been in office, which he's never visited any other country twice before. So he's really, really dedicated to building relationships between Colorado and Mexico. And you know, he really wants to encourage more innovation and entrepreneurship. We kind of talked a little bit about that in the last panel, about what, you know, building entrepreneurship, or sharing entrepreneurship skills that we are building here in the US, sharing them with the Mexican people to build up their own economy is, I think, very beneficial for both of our economies. And that's really the idea behind the Biennial of the Americas that the governor launched back when he was mayor of Denver in, I think it was 2006. And again, the upcoming Biennial of the Americas is happening in July, the second week in July, here in Colorado. And there'll be a number of different Mexican officials coming up to address and really speak about shared interests and shared issues that are happening both in the United States and in Mexico. So there's another opportunity to really begin the dialogue and continue the dialogue of what's going on here. So the Biennial of the Americas is taking place. And again, I think the other big event that was already touched, Carlos Bello already talked about it, but I'll go into a little bit more detail, is the idea of the North American Governor Premier Summit that is happening in Colorado Springs, October 30th and 31st at the Broadmoor, where all the governors and premiers are going to get together and again talk about shared issues, shared common, it's really shaped around economic development through North America, infrastructure development, workforce development as well. And those will really be tackled and having governor to governor talking really, again, at that local level of what can we be doing locally to strengthen the relationships between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. So that's going to be happening in your backyard. So I think it's going to be pretty significant. It's never happened before. And this really came about because the Governor Hickenlooper, and the governor of the state of Mexico, Governor Aguilar, had a conversation last year and just thought, hey, you know, we're doing things at the local level, you're doing things at the local level, how can we be just talking and building this relationship? Not cutting our federal government out by any means, that has to happen at that level, but what else can we be doing to build more relationships for these shared issues, again, like infrastructure and workforce development. So that's going to be happening in October, and again, businesses are going to be invited to really showcase the connections between these three markets. There is a lot of connection. Our economies are becoming more intertwined. So it's pretty exciting to be happening in Colorado. It could have happened all around the US, but you guys have the Broadmoor here, and it's quite attractive. We were touring actually with Governor Aguilar's folks just a couple weeks ago, and they were blown away by the beauty of there. So it's going to be a very nice setting for all these discussions to take place. So really, in wrapping things up, it's just, again, the local level economic connections are helping to really drive relationships forward as well. And again, we all have, as businesses and local governments, we all have a shared interest and a common interest in making relationships work with our neighbors, Mexico. So that's it.
And now we are going to introduce Mr. Eli Smilovitz, who is the Political and Press Counselor at the General Consulate of Mexico in Denver.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Dr. Klinger. It's an honor to be here. And thank you very much to you all for being here. I would like to, before starting the presentation, say that I come from a young country, I hope this is a perspective from a young Mexican, the perspective of a young Mexican from a young country. I'm 30 and the average age of my country is 27, so it's not unusual to find, I suppose, a perspective like mine in Mexico. So from that perspective, summarizes in that I see every time a more educated society and also a more international society. I think this international society, I didn't live 30 years ago, my parents' generation, but I do think we are a much more international society, and we have an amazing amount of messages we can access to, and that helps building many bridges and getting to know other countries and other cultures much faster and much deeply than probably any generation in the past. So that will have an impact. I don't know what type of impact will it have, but it will certainly have one. Right then, from ignorance is often translated into fear. And that fear, it's probably fear of the unknown or fear of the other, as some has stated before. And in the opposite realm, instead of ignorance, you have knowledge. And knowledge brings awareness. And at the very least, that awareness, at the very least, brings opportunity. So that's the perspective of a young Mexican. Now I'm going to pass to the presentation. I'm going to focus, I'm not an expert in security at all, but I will try to focus a little bit more about the context and hopefully bring Mexico a little bit closer, even though that I am quite sure that most of you have strong ties to Mexico and are probably more experienced and knowledgeable about many aspects in this bilateral relationship. But the NAFTA, for us, it's very important, and I would like to focus my presentation on that. So Mexico, for those of you who don't know, it's a very large country, as is the US, much even larger, but the size of Mexico, it's around the size of the 4 largest countries in Europe. And that's like France and Germany and Sweden and all of them together, so we are a very big country. And therefore, we also share a very, very large border, as some have mentioned in the past. It's almost 2,000 miles. It's the same distance as if you travel from Madrid, Spain to Ukraine, so it's more or less crossing the entire Western Europe. It's a very large border. And, so it's like crossing those Western Europe. So if you imagine, if you've been in Europe and you know how different those countries are among themselves, you'll see we don't have that complexity, but it's still a very large border. And again, we are a young country, most of the country, it's our age, the average age is 27 years old. That it's very positive from an economic point of view. We still have a long way to go in our working life, and that it's an advantage against other economies. You in the US are a little older than us. Your average age is 37, so we are 10 years younger. Then, opposite to what some that don't know a lot about Mexico might think, we're no longer a natural resources-based economy. We are a services economy, whether it's tourism or financial services or plenty of other types of services. Our primary sector, as we call it, the agriculture, it's only about 3% of our economy. So now 60% of it are services. And that is significant, and it has been evolving, and it will keep evolving. In part, obviously thanks to NAFTA and other foreign trade agreements Mexico has. We're a very open economy. We already have a free trade agreement with the European Union and with a bunch of other countries in Asia. We have not a free trade agreement with Japan, but certainly a very comprehensive agreement with Japan. And the US, for example, now is negotiating free trade agreement with the European Union. We have that a number of years ago. And we also have free trade agreements with pretty much every country in the Americas. So we are used to trade, and we are a good trading route, and we have plenty of agreements. The economic stability in Mexico, it's also a positive aspect of the economy. We are not growing as fast as some Asian countries, maybe not even close, but we have been growing steadily for around the past 15 years or so. So it's 1%, it's 2%, 2.5%, but that has been steady. If we don't count 2009, which it's impossible almost for any country to grow in 2008 or 2009. But besides 2009, most of years have been a very small growth, but slowly but firm. So that's why some international corporations or credit agencies are saying, you know, Mexico is a safe place to invest, not only because they grow, even if it's slowly, they also have international reserves, so their currency is better protected than other currencies, and all these macroeconomic factors that help that the international credit agencies take into account to say unanimously that Mexico is a good place to invest. Now, after NAFTA, NAFTA really started in 1994, there has been an enormous increase on the exports per capita in all the NAFTA countries. So that's a graphic where you see how much the exports per capita, as you may say. If you see Canada, they pretty much doubled their exports per capita in these 20 years. The US, I think they tripled it, almost. Sorry, that's the wrong... I'm sorry, that's the right slide. So, if you see, Canada almost doubled their exports per capita. They export a lot, and a lot more than other countries. Then the US more than doubled, and Mexico has benefited from that greatly. We pretty much multiplied our exports per capita ×5. So now that these three countries are exporting a lot, much more than other big countries, as you can see. And NAFTA is the central axis for those exports, because for example, Mexico, almost 3/4 of our exports come here to the US. So NAFTA has been a change of paradigm. The Consul General already mentioned the numbers. There are very amazing numbers. It's a very large territory. And if you add obviously the United States as the main partner, but if you add those three territories, or those three economies, you match or you equal one of the three largest economies in the world. Germany is the engine of Europe, Japan, and China. And these three don't have so comprehensive agreements. They don't speak that much to each other. They're not nearly as close physically as we are. And that's a competitive advantage too. This is just how much we trade in 24 hours. That includes Canada. So in 24 hours, $709 million in auto parts are traded. For me, it's very difficult to imagine that. It's an absurd amount, but that's what we do in 24 hours. So you add, and all these figures around are millions of dollars. So that's what we're already doing. And I must say that everybody wants to do more. So it's a promising future ahead. We are the third largest partner of the United States. China is in second place. And I don't want to say anything wrong about China, but our integration is much deeper. So for every dollar the US imports, 40% of that dollar, 40 cents, are from US raw materials or US contents. So we are integrated very deeply in some industries, particularly the automotive sector. It's a very neat example because for you to find your car at your car dealer, some of these components, till you find that finished car, then its components probably cross the border 7 or 8 times. So that's how integrated the automotive industry is. And we are also moving towards that direction in the commercial aviation industry and the, as we say, as we call it in Mexico, the aerospace industry. I think there is a lot of people trusting a lot in that, to that industry at the moment. There are synergies that car components and car manufacturers can also get the same certifications for parts in the commercial aviation and related industries. So it's really growing in Mexico very rapidly, and we trust that that's going to be one of the main industries for Mexico in the next few years. There are plenty of, but besides the automotive and aviation parts, there are a number of sectors, pretty much every sector. And then when it comes to the subject of the symposium and the shared human security and all, I do think it's important to realize that besides the size of the border, we have over 50 crossings. It's around 1 million people crosses on a daily basis and 300,000 vehicles. All these people it's moving around every day from the US to Mexico, from Mexico to the US. And yes, we have a lot of problems, but I think that should also be seen as an achievement, because to organize a border with so many crossings, where 1 million people cross on a daily basis, I don't think that's easy. And I think that should also be recognized both to the US and Mexican authorities. And these are just more data about Mexico. It's probably not as pertinent for this symposium. And this doesn't only happen at a corporate level or at a governmental level. When we speak about all this trade that happens and all these people that cross, there is also, at least from the Mexican perspective, 70% of all these exports are made by small and medium businesses. And let me also point out that small businesses and medium businesses in Mexico are not equivalent to small and medium businesses in the US. I believe a small company in the US, it's almost has the same invoicing on a yearly basis than a medium size in Mexico. So small businesses in Mexico are probably micro businesses here. And these companies have also something to say, and they have to cross, and they have to send and ship the products and import and export and everything. And that's why 70% of our exports come from SMEs, not only from the 50 largest corporations, the car dealers, the car manufacturers, and so on. So it's something that affects young people like me, and not necessarily the corporate, huge corporation, but also, they're all of them together in this. So I won't stop there a lot. That's it. Well, thank you very, very much.
20 years ago in Mexico, we used to say that we have two Mexicos. The Mexico rich in the north of Mexico and the poor Mexico in the south. But now, with this kind of numbers, we need to talk about it, because it's impressive that we have a lot of problems in Mexico. Last weekend, we have problems in 3 states: Jalisco, Colima, and I don't remember the last one.
Michoacán.
Problems, Michoacán, with narco traffic. The people, all the policy, all the how do you say, body safe national went to these states to put a kind of order, because they did, how do you say, the helicopter, official helicopter, they ride helicopter. And my brother is living in Jalisco, and he called me and he said, I need to leave this state because we have a lot of problems. And I saw these kind of numbers, and I think that now we have 5 or 6 Mexicos, because now we have more than, according to official numbers, we have more than 67% of people in poverty. And how can we have a lot of integration with Canada and USA. We export more than China, I see, and we need to talk about it because it's not fair that we have a lot of poor people and also we have people very rich. But anyway, thank you for your presentation. Thank you. Now it's a pleasure to introduce Mr. Jeffrey Smith. He's a humanitarian assistance analyst working at the USA Northern Command in Colorado Springs. Prior to assuming this position in 2008, he spent the latter part of his Air Force career as an international affairs policy specialist for Latin American affairs at the Pentagon and worked in security cooperation between the Armed Force of the USA and Chile at the USA Embassy, Santiago, Chile. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Muy buenos dias a todos. I want to thank UCCS for putting on this symposium, and in particular, I want to thank my friend Steve Recca for putting me on the hot seat up here from the Center for Human Security. And it's been very interesting as what I was discussing with one of my colleagues from U.S. Northern Command, which is, for some of you folks out here, is the Department of Defense of the United States. To come to what is more or less an academic symposium and be exposed to the vast variety of perspectives that people present in a forum like this. And then for me to be able to come up here and say, well, this is what I do. I'm actually more of a practitioner than I am an academic. But I think the two need to merge somewhere. And this is a great place for us to get together and discuss those ideas and develop the policies which the practitioners actually are responsible for implementing. So I want to thank you for you all putting this on. It's very important that we have the opportunity to get together and speak. So what area of human security is not more important to each and every one of us and more commonly shared around the world than the idea of protecting your personal life, the life of your family, your loved ones, mitigating any suffering that might happen to them, and protecting your property. And that's where we are in the arena of humanitarian assistance. Those are the mandates of the humanitarian. Protect lives, mitigate suffering, save lives, mitigate suffering, and protect property. And so it's kind of unusual to have that mandate and yet be inside of a vast organization which is not known for being kind and friendly most of the time, right? The Department of Defense. That's not our number one job. Our number one job, and we have three primary missions at U.S. Northern Command, I'll just touch on it briefly, is defense of the homelands, right? That's the number one. The second is defense support to civil authorities. So that is when is the military being called to support civil authority in the event of some sort of disaster that overwhelms our civil sectors of government. And the final one is security cooperation. And security cooperation is why we're here today. That's what we're here to talk about. It's an international mission, and it's one that Northern Command touches with our partners in Canada, in Mexico, and also in the Bahamas. Those are the three areas in which we touch in security cooperation. Humanitarian assistance is a subset of security cooperation. And so that's why I'm here, that's why I'm employed, and that's what I'm going to talk with you a little bit about. Because a lot of people don't really realize that the Department of Defense is in this sector of operations. Now, I'm not talking about disaster relief, which the defense also gets involved in, okay, international disaster relief. I'm talking about humanitarian assistance that occurs in this area of security cooperation before any disaster strikes in order to develop relationships, in order to develop trust between the two countries, and in order to build capacities. So with that all being said, I thought it was kind of interesting that both the Consul General of Mexico in Denver, Senor Carlos Bello, and also our Deputy Commander, General Doobie, both talked on the importance of cooperation. Cooperation being the key. General Doobie said that engagement, which I will say is cooperation, cooperative activities, leads to respect between the two parties, leading to trust and leading to friendship. I would say over the course of the last, we started our humanitarian assistance program. Northern Command's a young command. It's a post 9/11 command, and the humanitarian assistance aspect of it didn't really start kicking in until about 2008. So in about the last 6 or 7 years, we've made great strides in this area. There's an overarching policy for humanitarian assistance. It starts with law in Congress, and through that we get a funding appropriation that allows us to do training and equipping with our partners around the world. The activities are designed to relieve or reduce endemic conditions such as human suffering, disease, hunger, and privation, and we're also able to use them to help enhance a nation's capacity, organic capacity, to prepare for and respond to disasters in their own countries. So for us in Northern Command, we've kind of necked that down to 3 areas in which we typically work. One is disaster preparedness activities, which covers a broad spectrum of areas. Health and medical related issues. And also we have projects that are smaller in scope, say $3,000 to $15,000, that we call minimum cost projects, which touch in those different areas but are not, don't really necessarily fall into the area of training and equipping. They address urgent needs, but they're not necessarily helping the country or the government itself better develop a capacity to respond to a disaster. And the reason that the way that we do this at NORCOM is we're uniquely positioned because our command is here in the homeland, that we have a vast array of federal partners that are actually resident with us in our command. So we have the ability to reach out on a daily basis and touch representatives from FEMA, our Federal Emergency Management Agency, from the U.S. Geological Survey, to touch the science and technology aspect behind preparing for and responding to disasters. The Environmental Protection Agency, the Health and Human Services Agency. We have all of these experts resident with us, and that allows us this unique capacity to reach out and touch them. So what we do is we have developed relationships with the federal level of Mexico in both the armed forces naturally, but also in the civil sector. In particular, Civil Protection is our primary partner in Mexico in the area of helping to prepare for or build capacities to respond to disasters. And we have been able to, through discussions like this, getting together, getting to know each other, and finding out what each other's, what our needs are and what our abilities are, we've been able to develop a relationship with Civil Protection that says, hey, they've come to us and said, for instance, we have a need across the country of Mexico to develop better firefighting capacity. And we have like 15,000 firefighters. A lot of them are volunteer firefighters across the country, and the population of Mexico is very large. I mean, if you look at the ratio of firefighters to the population, it's pretty small. So we entered into an engagement with Mexico where we said, okay, well, how can we help you with that? And we were able to come back to the United States here, put on our thinking caps, and reach out and touch some retired firefighters from Miami area, Dade County, Los Angeles, Spanish speakers that were able to go in and provide the training that they needed at all different levels within the fire department, from the actual tactical aspect of fighting fires to the lieutenants who supervise them, to the fire chiefs of each one of these fire departments, to provide equipment, to provide training to them, provide it to them in a format in which they will be able to replicate that training across Mexico. We brought those people in from all 31 states across Mexico. We provided them that training. I think we trained 800 or so firefighters across those 3 levels, and then they returned back to their states. And because we gave it to them in a format in which they could replicate it, we call that train the trainer, they could go back with that equipment and with that courseware and with that experience and be able to replicate that training for the 15,000 firefighters across Mexico. Civil Protection came to us and said, we're interested in developing urban search and rescue. We don't really have that capacity at a federal level. And we said, well, let's see how we can help you with that. So using the expertise that we garnered from our representatives in FEMA and their relationships with the Urban Search and Rescue Task Force in Virginia and in California, which deploy internationally and which have deployed internationally recently for the Nepal earthquake, we were able to gather the information that we needed in order to help the Mexicans understand what it is that is required to have a team that is certified at a level, trained and certified at a level in which in the future, if they wanted to deploy them internationally, they would be trained at that level, at that international standard. And then we were able to reach out to our partners in Health and Human Services who had helped respond to our Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance to disasters around the world in order to bring some expertise in to say, okay, well, this is the type of equipment that they would need. This is the type of training that they would need. So for a relatively small amount of money, we started out incrementally over several years, funding about $500,000 a year to purchase equipment and to purchase training, and then to deliver that equipment and training in Mexico. To the primary recipients for this project are the Mexican Federal Police. They have a search and rescue group that supports civil protection. So they became the primary recipients of that equipment and training, but we also asked that the Mexicans please invite representatives from the SEDENA, from the Army, as well as from SEMAR, from the Navy, because each one of those services has a inherent responsibility and authority to respond to disasters within Mexico. So we said, okay, we want to, you federal police are going to be the primary recipients of this, but we'd like to bring the training in, and we'd like to expand the base of training across all of the folks at a federal level have a responsibility to respond to disasters. And that was received very well. So we were able to provide them with basic level rope rescue training, use of mechanical advantage, basic search and rescue, incident command system, collapse structure rescue, water rescue, and shoring buildings. Those sorts of things are the types of training and equipment we've been able to provide them over the last several years for a relatively inexpensive amount of money. What we'd like to see in the future, so I'd say if we're looking for a way ahead, is to, we're nearing the completion of that effort with the federal police, is to say, okay, we think it would be a good idea, and we've offered this up, this is no surprise, to the Mexican Navy first. Say, would you be interested in receiving this kind of dedicated training and equipment? In the future, we might do that with SEDENA, the Army, as well. And if we were really to go full bore on this, I think we would need to get the government of Mexico to agree with us that it's time to go down to the state levels in Mexico There are several, maybe 3 or so urban search and rescue teams across Mexico that reside at the state level, in which we would be able to go in and help bring them up to the same level that we're training the federal teams at. As you know, an earthquake of the magnitude in Nepal is probably the worst nightmare scenario for Mexico. In Mexico City, they had one in the late 80s.
1985.
That's right, 1985. You win the prize,
I
man.
love it.
In 1985. And it's going to take more than one team and one cache of equipment in order to respond to a disaster of that magnitude on a domestic level. Before even we go, any country would ask outside for international assistance. So that's just to give you a brief overview of what's going on in the area of urban search and rescue. Seismic events are a huge deal. As I just mentioned, a primary focus for the government of Mexico. And starting several years back, they said Civil Protection asked us asked NORTHCOM specifically if we could assist them with developing a national level exercise for an earthquake. We had actually previously connected them with FEMA, and FEMA, we funded a FEMA planner, a Spanish-speaking FEMA planner, to go to Mexico City, and he helped Mexico in the development of their national earthquake plan, which looks at the primary scenario being a large magnitude earthquake that causes a tsunami and massive destruction also in the Mexico City area. So they went the next step and they said, we have the plan now, thank you for assisting us with that. Would you be able to assist us with developing a national level exercise? This is a priority of President Calderon. And we said, well, let us get back to you. I think we can do that. And once again, we reached out to our partners in FEMA, and they sent down a team of individuals that were responsible for developing national level exercises here in the United States. We met at in San Luis Potosí and had some really excellent discussions, bringing in members of Civil Protection from across the country and at the federal level, bringing in the Office of the Oficina OPR, Office of the President of the Republic. We had representatives there from Secretaria de Gobernación, their DHS more or less equivalent. We're all in the room as our FEMA experts help them understand what that type of exercise would look like, what the various steps it would take in order to put the event on along the way. And as a result of that, we received a request to send Mexicans to the Master Exercise Practitioner program that FEMA teaches out east. We funded those individuals to participate in that training. They came back, and with those two pieces of the puzzle together, they started developing what that exercise was going to look like. And I failed to mention also that we, at that exercise planning meeting, that we had members of the Armed Forces of Mexico there as well. So all the key players were in place, and about a year to 18 months later, we received, at NORTHCOM, received an invitation to go down to Mexico and observe the execution of Mexico's first national level earthquake exercise. So our engagement is spreading depth and scope year by year, working everything from tactical firefighting, working training and equipping for hazmat response in the 15 border cities, 10 inland border cities in Mexico, the urban search and rescue, firefighting. We have some technical things that we worked with as well in the Nogales area with floodwater monitoring and alerting systems because the river runs from south to north. We've been able to work with USGS on that, partnering with USGS to help develop a small piece of a larger network for earthquake seismic detection. And it has not gone unnoticed what the value of this is to the government of Mexico. In fact, last year at National Civil Protection Day, Presidente Peña Nieto issued a personal invitation to our then commander, General Jacoby, 4-star general of U.S. Northern Command, to attend the event. And to put this in perspective, he had his entire cabinet there. He had all of the state-level directors for civil protection at the meeting in the plenary session, and something that I think is extremely historic. He actually thanked General Jacoby for everything that U.S. Northern Command was doing to help the people of Mexico, as well as the government of Mexico better respond to disasters, and applauded him in front of the entire plenary session with all those types of level of people. And I don't think that has ever happened. So when General Dubey earlier was saying that over the last 3 years, the quality of the relationship between our two countries is really growing. To have the President of Mexico invite a 4-star general as his personal guest and applaud him in front of the entire cabinet of the government of Mexico is a pretty significant event. And we like to, if my arms were long enough, I could pat myself on the back all day long for these things. But it is a significant signal that this is a great area to be working in. Humanitarian assistance, disaster preparedness. As I mentioned, we also work in the health and medical arena a little bit. So we've had some events that address those sorts of issues. Leaching of chemicals due to the eruptions of the volcanoes in Mexico, and health-related incidents related to that. And I don't want to leave the floor without talking about, this isn't just about policy. This is about touching lives where it matters most. In our minimum cost projects, we're working extremely, that's to say we're doing good business on the border in particular. We partner with our U.S. consulates there who know the terrain, know what the needs are, and know who the government entities are that we could best help. And we've been able to donate equipment and supplies through DEEF there to an entity that actually manufactures wheelchairs and prosthetics for indigent locals who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford them. They ruggedize these things so they're almost like 4-wheel vehicles, and they personalize them for whatever the needs are of their handicap. Fetal monitors to hospitals, medical supplies for ambulances. These are just some of the types of things that we're doing through our humanitarian assistance program. If I were to say anything, it's a ripe field to be working on. The country is very large. The needs are huge, as we discussed. The reason we can spend the money in Mexico is because of the per capita income of Mexicans. It falls below the policy threshold that allows us to do that, even though, as we mentioned, it's a rich country, but the per capita income is low enough to where we go under. So the needs are great, and the country is large, the population is large, and if I had to say anything, if there was anything that I would like to improve about the program, and I'm not an empire builder, but the money that comes in to the Department of Defense is, this year I believe was $107 million. And then that money is spread across the different combatant commands around the world. So NORTHCOM, SOUTHCOM, PACOM, EUCOM, AFRICOM, CENTCOM. And there's some sort of formula that's used, I don't know what it is. And we come out with $2.5 million to spend on what is a strategically important partner to our country, both economically and security-wise, just from the perspective that it is not just on our border, it is our neighbor. And so if I had to say anything, I think that there was room to improve the amount of funding that is going to Mexico for these types of projects. If you take a look at it, the size and population of Mexico, just population alone, is the size of several Latin American countries put together. And yet we're not being funded at what I consider would really meet the needs. We're just scratching the surface right now. So thank you again for allowing me to be here. I do think it's an awesome forum. Thank you for listening to what the Department of Defense through U.S. NORTHCOM is doing for Mexico in the arena of disaster preparedness, health and medical, and these mid-cost projects that are touching the lives of people at the very fundamental levels. Thank you.
Now we are going to open a 10-minute session, question and answers. And please, if someone would like to just raise your hand and ask this.
I had a question for Ellie, actually. As a young Mexican, can you sort of share what young Mexicans' perspectives are on both the United States and sort of the concept of North America? Mexico's role in that?
Well, I think the concept of North America is probably the key message these years. The summit in Colorado Springs, it's going to be an historic event, and I think the message there is North America, and that's the first priority. I think a lot of people in Mexico that are young people have grown with US cartoons and a vast array of channels. The penetration of TVs in Mexico is quite high. I don't have a number, a precise figure, but the TV is a very basic component of a Mexican house. And cable TV, it's also very important in Mexico, and that's also a window for young Mexicans to know more about North America. And I think we have received many more US channels than Asian, African, or European channels. So I think there is a connection. People from Mexico like the US culture. The companies from the US have enormous success in Mexico. Mexican food is the best food in the world, but they also have a US food. And yeah, I think there is a strong cultural connection.
To ask you, how can we exert some pressure in getting more funding to you for Mexico?
Why don't you?
Well, that's a very good question. We first of all, I have to say that it's the number one responsibility lies with us within our building in order to do that, and we need to elevate we need to elevate the need or the desire to our commander first. He's going to be the heavy hitter in the interagency community in order to go to Admiral Rixby at the Defense Security Cooperation Agency who manages the money, or even higher at OSD levels to say, hey, we really need to look at this, or even to advocate for more funding from Congress for humanitarian assistance overall. Other than that, I think that it is about influencing people who can make decisions. So in any way, shape, or form, whether that's letter writing, whether that's, we're talking about an academic forum here, research and publication on the issue. Those are certainly different methods which we can use in order to highlight the need to decision makers in Washington, D.C.
And while you're up there, how can you assist with humanitarian assistance the problems that go on in the border? You know, the taking advantage of the people coming in, helping Mexico secure its own borders in the south. How is there something that you could put in place to offer more help, humanitarian help in the border crossings?
So I have to say that's an excellent question. It's one that we've been trying to wrap our brains around a little bit. You know, how can we use humanitarian assistance? The law and the policy surrounding it limits us in certain areas. So we can't use, no one in the U.S. government, Department of Defense can use humanitarian assistance funding for anything that really touches law enforcement and security. Okay. Now what we can do is, like I was speaking about, alluding to earlier, we can go into the border areas and say, you know, where are their needs? And they can come back and say, well, we have an area, a safe house, so to speak, for folks, and we need to improve the security on it. You know, so. Or they need medical supplies, food or clothing. They need books. If you want to talk about education, we've supplied countless, thousands of books to public libraries in border communities, and that's kind of where, you know. It's not a great answer, I know, but it really is kind of, it's the problem between law enforcement and security and what's really a humanitarian assistance need. And so that's, it's trying to find a happy medium in there where we can work effectively and do it in compliance with our laws and our policy. That's our challenge.
So does that eliminate giving water bottles to the people crossing the desert and so on?
I would say yes.
Okay.
I would say yes. You know, for instance, there was a question that came up, what can we do to help the unaccompanied children in Mexico, you know, on the Mexican side? Well, that's a sensitive question. It's not that we don't want to help their human condition, but the problem is that the money is for Mexico. It's not for Central Colombia or Central American kids and refugees passing through Mexico to come illegally into the U.S. I mean, we're talking about illegal operations here. And so we can't really support anything that would be contrary to the spirit and intent of U.S. law. It's tough. Thank you.
Let me ask you a question, please. When you're talking about collaboration, that's mean another relationship between Mexican and American. What's the hardest thing doing them? You know, I'm talking about culture and how Mexican take decisions, how American take decisions. It's hard to collaborate with Mexican.
It's more difficult to collaborate when you don't have a shared perspective, right? Fortunately, humanitarian space is a shared space. Everyone, I didn't really allude to it in the discussion, but you know, why does Mexico want us to help them in these areas? Well, they have a role and a mission and an authority to respond to those disasters and protect their people. So it improves the perspective in the eyes of the people for their government. It improves the legitimacy of the government when we go in and do these things in the humanitarian space. So they understand that. When the president, was thanking Jerome Jacoby, he had recognized that our efforts, collaborative efforts, because they are collaborative, are helping improve the perspective legitimacy of the Mexican government with their people. So in that sense, it can be, it's easier to collaborate. And our projects, we provide the equipment and training. It's donated. We never deliver equipment without training because it's about capacity building. But the other thing that we don't do is we don't sustain. So before we ever enter into one of these agreements with our partners, they understand and they acknowledge and they accept that they will sustain whatever that is. And we try to deliver it in a manner in which it's almost self-sustaining. That train-to-trainer format is a great way to do that. But spares and repairs and replacements of equipment that wears out, that's the responsibility of whoever it's donated to. It no longer becomes ours. And that's why we're so interested in building capacity, in collaborating versus just donating. That doesn't do anything for either party. I hope that answers your question. That shared space is really key for collaboration.
The last question, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. McConnell.
Well,
Bear.
just to tag on a minute there, I think we also need to remember about this neighborness that we refer to. People that, your example of firefighters, those guys, or the urban search and rescue guys, they came back gaining knowledge themselves. This is a two-way street. And my favorite example of that is Katrina, when the Mexican Army marched into Texas, fed a whole lot of people who were in trouble after that disaster. And this has its basis in helping each other, learning from each other, and moving forward in a North America context.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Congratulations for being here, and according to the agenda, we have just 2 minutes to finalize this session, and my comments are going to say that USA and Mexico, we have a lot of things to collaborate. Thanks to institutional efforts, we heard experiences about collaboration in this kind of field. And I think that talking about trade and economic development, it's great to know that Colorado is doing very well with Mexican institutions. And also, the face that I see today with the presentation of my friend, I like this Mexico. I would like that this Mexico is permanent in this way, and I would like to know that maybe in 20 years, maybe more, that Mexico could be more egalitarian society. And thank you for being here. I appreciate all your time. And finally, I would like to appreciate the presence of the Vice Chancellor of this university. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much.